Hello, and welcome to AstroLunaChick's Guide to the Universe. I am hostess Susan, also known as AstroLunaChick. And I'm recording this on Monday. It's a day later than usual. I usually do my live streams on Sunday, but I've got some other stuff going on. It's been a busy time for me. And I'll also just blame it on Mercury retrograde. What the hell? Uh, I don't know why I always want to switch things up as soon as Mercury goes retrograde, which usually involves making some adjustments to technology and the way I'm putting out the show. So, I'm kind of self-sabotaging and, my my Mercury retrograde stuff is probably just of my own making. But anyway, I'm here. It's Monday. Hope you're all doing well. The moon is in Pisces today. It's drifty, it's dreamy, it's definitely escapist weather. So I know that's where I'm at. Yeah, I've actually been going over the astrology for days now. And started on Saturday and thought, oh, I'll could do this early. I could pre-record it. I'll do it on Saturday and then I'll have it up on Sunday. But there was just so much going on and just looking at things from so many different levels that I just kept going down rabbit holes. And not that it wasn't productive, because it was, but it is a very Mercury retrograde thing to do, to just kind of let your mind go very deep. Just trying to put some pieces of the puzzle together. I guess I need to just separate my things into maybe not doing everything all at once, because I'm looking at planets, I'm looking at asteroids, I'm looking at stars. And so it gets a little bit murky, but it's okay. It's going to make for a better show, I think, in the long run. Although it does get a little discombobulated sometimes. But anyway, so I'm going to do a brief overview of the week and then look at the days more specifically, and we'll go from there. But before I do, station identification. You can find me on social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble. I have that Rumble channel, so go subscribe over there. I heard there was a little bit of a thing going on with Rumble and content creators not being able to upload their videos or access their accounts. I'm not sure what that was all about. Probably having to do with the Mercury retrograde and probably having to do with some sort of sorting out of different accounts and what they want to do with censorship. That's just my opinion. I noticed with Mercury retrogrades, stuff with technology almost seems like, they're upgrading things on their side too, or something, cog in the wheel just isn't working right. So it always sort of gives me a head up kind of as to where things might be going. Like Rumble used to be okay, but maybe, it made it through last Mercury retrograde, the stuff that was going on, but it was challenged as far as what they will allow to be talked about. So who knows? Maybe this time it's Rumble. But What other Mercury retrograde stuff is going on? Oh no, I was doing stated identification. Yeah, Rumble, subscribe. I have a newsletter on Substack. You can go to astrolunachick.substack.com. And if you look in the link, in the description box, there's a link for my Gilded channel, which is very similar to Discord. It's just like a private chat channel. There's not a whole lot going on over there, but hopefully you guys start subscribing and following and posting, and it'll inspire me to do more. So also, if you are interested in getting reading from me, the best way to get in contact with me is either you can email me at astrologychick@gmail.com, or you can call or send a text message to the AstroLunaChick hotline, which is 914-222-1231. And I am running a special. It's 25% off of my normal rates. So makes a great gift idea. And in these confusing times, it's always good to get some clarity. Okay, well, with that being said, let's see where we're at. Right now, today, the moon being at roughly 12 degrees of Pisces. No, it's up to 13, 14 degrees right now. As I was looking at the astrology earlier today, I was checking out some asteroids, as I often do. I will look at where the moon is first and foremost, the aspects the moon is making, and also the asteroids that are connected with the moon first, and then whatever planets seem to be really big in play. But today, the moon is conjunct asteroid Karma at 14 degrees Pisces, Nessus at 16 degrees of Pisces, and Amor at 18 Pisces. And I find that very interesting because I just had a conversation with someone a couple of days ago about karma and what that meant to me. She asked me to clarify what I meant by karma. And I said it kind of in an offhand way because it's just sometimes easier to use the word and rather than kind of go into the deeper meaning of it. But as she said, people have different interpretations of that word. And I was really happy actually that she asked me that, because I don't look at it as punishment. Okay, I think in the Western mind, at least, and karma is an Eastern concept. So the Western mind has turned it into something more resembling a belief structure that you would find in Christianity or Judaism. I don't know about Muslim, but I'm thinking more or less an Abrahamic concept of, God's vengeance and punishment, and that karma means, it's bad things that happen to you for bad things that you've done. And I don't think of it that way at all. So just looking at the actual definition of karma. So karma comes from the word karman, which is Sanskrit, which means repercussion. Cause and effect, basically action, effect, and fate or destiny. And I guess I was sort of taking it for granted that, you know, my own definition. Um, but I've always tried to be aware of the way I'm coming across, when I say certain things, which is why I guess I'm very wordy, because I would rather describe the thing than use just a blanket term that can easily be misconstrued by people. And I'm pretty aware of the polarity, if you will, of the spectrum of the way people think of certain concepts and define them when you talk about certain term. So it's interesting because during this discussion and this concept, contemplating my response, I asked my son, who obviously a lot of what he thinks came from me and what I think and the way I've explained things to him, because we've had very deep philosophical and spiritual discussions. And so I know that he understands these things, but I wanted to see if what his response would be, and if he did sort of internalize it and interpret it as, in the concept of sin and God's wrath and retribution. So he kind of basically said, like, cause and effect for our actions, the things that we've done, and how they come back to us, either this life or in the next life. But he used the word repercussion, and that was part of the dictionary interpretation. But we do think of repercussions as being punishment, right? Like our dad says, if you break curfew, there will be repercussions. But a repercussion is basically the effect that comes from a cause. It's the reaction to an action. Repercussions. There's repercussions for breaking man's law, just like there is for breaking natural law or God's law, let's say, not in the religious sense, and those repercussions are not always, an eye for an eye, return in kind. And sometimes they don't come from another person. Sometimes it's the effect on our own soul or our own psyche for doing something that's out of alignment, let's say, with our destiny or our conscience. And there's not good or bad karma. I think there's good karma too. So what I was trying to explain to my friend, that I didn't look at it, I don't think of it in terms of punishment, and I also don't think of it in terms of, if you do good things, do enough good things, you'll only get good things back. Not true, because I think that karma is basically lessons and difficulties and obstacles, usually, because I look at Saturn, but it's just things that we go through and experiences that we have that teach us what it is that we're meant to learn in this lifetime. That I believe, the soul has chosen to come in with a certain theme of growth and challenges. And so we're going to have certain experiences that would set us up to feel a certain way, and um, our beliefs and our perceptions be shaped or misshaped, and then we have to unravel it, let's say. Um, so in that context, I look at our karma as like the story, the story of our life, of our path, our unfoldment, of our enlightenment, of our wisdom and understanding that we take with us. And, it can be that we do negative things in one life and we have repercussions in the next life. And that sounds, it sounds terrible. Like the first thing we think of is, well, if you killed somebody in another life, you're going to come in and you have to pay for that karma. I mean, I think that's like extremely polarized thinking. So maybe we might have to feel how it feels to lose a loved one or whatever it is. I think it's much more complicated than people make it out to be. I mean, you could think of it in terms of, well, you have a lifetime where you sort of missed the mark because you really needed to learn that you had to follow your own path and stand up for yourself, but instead you relied on your relationships because you had a cushy life and maybe didn't pursue your own dreams because you supported your partner and it was all about them and their success. And so your ambitions and your dreams went by the wayside. So the karma in this life could be something like you start to do the same thing, put everything into the relationship, into the other person, and everything is about finding that relationship, or you're too focused on the other and not focused enough on yourself. So every time you slip into that pattern, you have a repercussion. Things don't go well. It's because it's not necessarily where you want to be. The lesson is to tip the scales in the balance in towards yourself, developing the self, being independent, not being reliant on someone else, not putting everything into the partner to the detriment of your own needs. That's an example of a lifetime, karma of a lifetime. Now, how that plays out many different ways, but the theme can be very similar for many people. The same goes for like family versus your career and achievements in the world. Your money versus other people's money. And, obviously the combinations are infinite. So that's the word for the day. Karma, as the moon is conjunct asteroid karma. And I hope that clarified some things, and maybe it can make us think in the future when we think about karma, and how it doesn't have to mean judgment. There's no guilt or shame, beyond this dualistic world that we live in. We live in a world where there is extreme polarity. The mind tries to categorize things into light and dark, good and evil. Who's the bad guy? Who's to blame? Who's right? Who's wrong? And life is definitely not black and white. There are many shades of gray. And when we can take out the polarity of it and just detach and look at the situation, rather than charging it with it's good or it's bad, you just take it as this is what is. What would be a better option? If things are not going well, or certain things aren't working in our life, what could we do differently? Because in terms of energetic mechanics, right, energy that we put in will get a certain result. So if we are putting time, energy, effort, focus on a situation from one perspective, changing our perspective can shift the situation, because it causes an internal shift. It causes an emotional shift. So there might not be that charge. We're thinking about it differently. So we may start to act differently. And then that would change the dynamic. So we could get a different result. Anyway, I guess that's all I wanted to say about karma. All right, back to where we are exactly in astrology. December 18th. We are at a 1 day, and our 369 days are, well, the 9 was the 17th, that was yesterday. The 3 will be the 20th, and 6 will be the 23rd. The 9 day will be the 26th of December. So how do I look at that? I look at the numerology of the date, reduce it down. The cycle goes from 1 to 9. Think of it as a new moon. The 1 day is a new moon. We have a new beginning of that energetic cycle. We don't quite know how things are shaping up into the next, in this 9-day period until about the 3rd day. So think of it as like cellular mitosis, right? As the cells multiply and we start to see something take shape. So the 3 is the kind of the first, almost like the waxing crescent of the moon. And then the 6 would be like a full moon, and the 9 would be like, the last half of the lunar phase. But in terms of doing things or observing, whether you're doing or observing, to do something, like if you're trying to create something within that 9-day cycle, the most productive days, in my opinion, and from what I've seen in my experience, are the 3, the 6, and the 9. And so you have your intention that you set with the 1 day or the new moon, so to speak, and then taking action, even if it's just symbolic action, to help the energy build towards where you're going. Or you just observe. You can observe the 3, 6, and the 9 day to see what is the message and how are things shaping up, and how we can participate and plan our actions accordingly. So when I look at the astrology, I'm looking at, to me, those days are very important, what the aspects look like. And that will kind of tell you also whether or not you should take action, or whether, you might take a hit on that day. As the roller coaster goes up, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it's down. So, or the Ferris wheel, the wheel of fortune. So, all right, here we go. Let me go back to my notes. So today it's Monday. the 18th, and we have some really good aspects. I like the aspects this week, even though it is a Mercury retrograde. Mercury is making some really good aspects. So take advantage of this week. Don't forget that Mercury went retrograde last week. So this is the second week. And next week is a different energy. So I think that the actions we take this week and take advantage of opportunities, because that's what these alignments are going to bring. Opportunities, information, and opportunities. Take advantage this week. Jump on it, because the message I'm getting overall with the aspects are there's an opportunity, move quickly on it. So, okay, so we're talking about the week of the 18th through the 24th, today, Monday, through next Sunday. So really starting yesterday. So it's covering yesterday, today, and tomorrow is the aspect that I'm talking about with Mercury retrograde. It's making a trine to Jupiter, also retrograde in Taurus. Now, at the very end of the month, Jupiter is going to go direct, and then like the next day, more or less, Mercury will go direct. So everything that we're doing and hearing and experiencing is preparing us for the big shift from 12/31, 2023 to 1/1/2024, because it's pretty much all systems go. Mercury will be direct, Jupiter will go direct, Uranus goes direct pretty soon after that, I believe in January. I'm not mistaken. Neptune's direct, Pluto's direct. This is unusual because it seems like last year, maybe even the year before, we had a lot of retrogrades around in January, if I recall. So, good opportunities this week with Mercury retrograde, trine to Jupiter retrograde. Travel, information, making plans. With the Mercury retrograde, it's almost like we're being given an opportunity to go back and review some things as they are delayed from starting, but we're given an idea of where those things are going to go once Mercury goes direct, Jupiter goes direct. So what does it have to do with? So Jupiter is, well, it's considered a very benefic, very fortunate planet. It's considered lucky. It expands things. It also expands our horizons and it expands our understanding. We're able to look from a higher perspective. You know, Jupiter, another name for Jupiter was Zeus. Zeus is also represented as an eagle. So you can think of it as something that helps you to get a bird's eye view about what's going on. So Jupiter rules Sagittarius. We're in Sagittarius season. Mars and the Sun are in Sagittarius. Mercury will retrograde back into Sagittarius. Most of its shadow was in Sagittarius from 21 degrees. So by the end of this week, let's say next week, the week after this week, Mercury, the mind, communications, travel, Sagittarius and Jupiter also have to do with travel, but it's worldwide travel. So Mercury rules Gemini. Gemini has to do with the immediate neighborhood, travel in terms of short trips. It's news and information that comes from your immediate environment, whereas Jupiter and Sagittarius is more global. It's other countries, societies outside of your norm, right? And it's things that affect foreign countries. And so it does have to do with foreign policy and war and stuff like that. Also travel. So we're talking about airplanes. But Mercury retrograde being in a trine to Jupiter, and from Capricorn, where Mercury is, to Taurus, where Jupiter is, it definitely looks like a very good aspect to me. Like to me, we are afforded a lot of protection when it comes to our faith and belief in positive outcomes and in our ability to kind of go in and like shift some things around. And maybe we're getting information that is going to help us to make some changes, because by the end of the week, Mercury is going to make a sextile to Saturn. And Mercury is in Capricorn, which rules, Saturn rules. And so I do think that we are going to get some maybe wise advice, or be able to come up with a practical plan, something concrete that is going to be very helpful. And just Jupiter being, a planet that brings blessings, and being in retrograde, it might be something that comes to us from the past, or like a blessing or a benefit that comes to us in a material sense, because we're both talking about two earth signs here. But in this case, like, I think we could say it's perhaps some good karma, but it's something that maybe we weren't aware of, that we get a bonus, or some kind of a break, because we deserve it, I guess. I don't know. I do believe in it in terms of karma, that in some way, shape, or form, even though we go through difficulties, if we can, in our hearts, stay in integrity and, concern ourselves with our own actions and how we treat people, and how we handle situations, I think that does come back to us. I believe that goes a long way, even though I don't believe in like, oh, if I just do good things. It has to do with your heart. It's not external works. It really has to do with, are you doing your own internal work, and are you staying in integrity and holding your ground for what's right, choosing what's right, even though some things that have been done to us may not be right. It's not, returning evil for evil. I don't know. I just think it goes a long way. So that's what I feel like is kind of supporting us the whole week, Jupiter and Mercury. And so because it's Mercury, it's the mind and going back over the past. And so maybe it's finding something that a resource that you didn't think that you had. Maybe some money stuffed away in a coat pocket. And then you come across it and you're like, oh, it's like winning the lottery. But it helps to shift perspective because it is talking about Mercury. And in retrograde, we are redoing, rethinking, replanning, reassessing, rediscovering, maybe. And then, so that's really like Monday and Tuesday, and still pretty much in orb Wednesday. And then Wednesday, the 20th, and Thursday, the 21st, we have Mercury making a sextile to Saturn. Mercury will be at about 1 degree of Capricorn. No, sorry, it's 2 to 3 degrees of Capricorn, sextiling Saturn in Pisces at 2 to 3 degrees of Pisces. And when I think about it, back months ago, for probably a few months over the summertime, asteroid Karma was actually conjunct to Saturn. I don't think it was really that long ago. Maybe it was August, September. And so it was kind of bringing more of a sense of the way Saturn operates with karma. And from what I've seen is that Saturn wants to keep us in integrity. It does put obstacles in our way that we have to work through so that we learn certain things. And having learned those lessons, we try to live by Saturn's rules, which are to be mature, to be accountable for things, to take responsibility, to be in integrity. Those are the things that Saturn is here to teach. So during that time, if we were possibly thinking about karma in those terms, we might have had an opportunity where we could choose one way or the other, and Saturn is that little voice inside that says, oh no, that will come back to bite you. Be careful. And then when we had the Sun and then Mars go into Sagittarius at the end of November, I did see a lot of what I would consider to be karmic retribution in terms of those types of people who are just so shady. And, you look at them and you think, are they ever going to get theirs? I saw some justice. It made me happy. Anyway, so yeah, the 20th and the 21st, Saturn sextile to Mercury, even though it's retrograde, very productive. It will be a little easier, perhaps, for the mind to focus on this goal, this thing that this task we're trying to complete. That's Saturn. And in Pisces, it's maybe been a little bit hard to pin down. Saturn is concrete. It's structure, it's physicality, it is rules and repercussions, and it's hard to define in Pisces, but maybe we're starting to get a handle on it and understand maybe what our responsibility is or should be in terms of how we can go, moving forward, or try to stabilize a situation, or looking at a long-term situation. So Saturn in Pisces, I would look at as in the karmic sense, long-term situations where there is, there's some kind of a lesson, obviously, the difficulty that we need to overcome. And in realizing what that is, putting our integrity towards shifting the situation. When we understand, then we can act and not react the same way. What is the lesson? It's very, well, it does apply to the collective because Pisces is the collective unconscious. So it is something that collectively as a human having an experience, a spiritual identity, having a physical experience of this. It is something that it would broadly affect the consciousness of humanity. And it's deeply rooted and deeply unconscious. And it's hard to get a grasp on. But maybe we're understanding how it might be playing out. And it does have to do with fear. Saturn has a lot to do with fear. Fear of the unknown is Saturn in Pisces, and obstacles that we don't understand. Just hard to define it, hard to put your finger on it. But it is because it is a deeply spiritual lesson that has to do with all of humanity. And so we're only going to maybe have a few pieces of the puzzle, but there are pieces of the puzzle. So Saturn would have us deal with our responsibility, how we should respond. So also the 19th and 20th, so Tuesday and Wednesday, and even into Thursday, these are some big aspects that are happening this week. So, last week we had the sun square to Neptune, and that was like really murky and hard to get a grasp on and a little difficult to make a decision, not quite able to see clearly, but getting some clarity, sun shining a light on it. Probably because we have an inkling of things to come, which starting to get a sense of it, starting to get a handle on something, big changes. Like we all kind of feel it, but things are weird. And stuff comes bubbling up from the surface, our subconscious things that we normally suppress. But what I mean by a sense of something coming, because where the sun has passed through at the last degree of Sagittarius, making that square to Neptune. And squares do indicate action, but not knowing what action to take and not maybe understanding the actions that we see being taken. But Mercury and Mars by December 26th, 27th are going to be at the spot where the sun is transiting now. So we are getting a heads up to information, news, ideas, communications, decisions, and actions, but very, very strong actions because we're talking about Mars and Mercury. So Mercury has been out of bounds. We're getting a lot of information, a lot. It's a lot to handle, a lot of realizations, epiphanies, right? Because Mercury also hit this spot between like 25 degrees of Sag, because that's making the square to Neptune. So it was almost overwhelming, too much to handle. But Mars is the action that's coming in, and Mercury. So it's like, okay, that's the date that we're really looking towards. And so we're being given an opportunity to help us to navigate whatever change, whatever the big thing is coming at the end of the month. So, and again, unless you have planets or points at the last degrees of, let's say, mutable signs, which is Gemini, Sag, Virgo, and Pisces, around 25 to 30 degrees of those signs, those will be most prominently affected. And maybe the early degrees of Cardinal. So Aries, Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra will also be affected. So you may not be personally affected, but you might be watching it play out with other people. So, okay, so by Thursday, the 21st, we have the winter solstice. Occurs in the evening, Eastern time, 10:27 p.m. and Pacific time, 7:27 p.m. on the 21st. And we have, let's see, we have Venus opposing Uranus. So that could be interesting developments and changes and crazy, shocking, exciting, interesting things going on with money and relationships and situations where we're talking about my money versus your money. So anything to do with banking, there could be something, if you've been watching some of the things that have been going on with the banks worldwide, and there has been some hacking. So things to do with finances and possibly technology too. We could be talking about electricity, technology, with that opposition to Uranus. It could be something financial related, and that I'm going to give that a 3-day window, because by really it's starting now. So today, the 18th, Venus is at 17 degrees of Scorpio. Uranus is at 19 degrees of Taurus, and Venus also rules Taurus. So, Venus in Scorpio is it's bringing a lot of scandal, things coming up around women, and obviously money because it's Venus. But there's also coming out like things about criminality and networks of people and the money involved. And, if you follow the money, you find out who's connected to who and whatnot. But it looks like a surprise, a shocking thing, but you know, it's doesn't have to be happening to you. You could be the one who's pulling the money off the account and saying, sayonara. Um, sorry, I'm just thinking about something. Um, you know, it's not a bad or a good thing. Somebody taking the money out of the account and saying sayonara, I mean, maybe they have the right to do that. Uh, like I said to a friend of mine the other day, you know, lying isn't always bad. If you're lying to protect, you know, your life, if your life could be in danger, right? So same thing. You do what you have to do to be safe and within the confines of the law. You know, and then, you know, you got to look at, there's man's law and then there's divine law, natural law. Like killing is not right, but killing someone because they're going to kill your family, that's different. So, you know, not everything is black and white. So this is an interesting aspect. It's going to be going on all week. I think it relates to secrets, intrigue, discovering information that you didn't know, perhaps. That's Venus in Scorpio. That's like private investigator stuff. And it can have to do with other people's money or the banking system or realizing you got to pay all kinds of taxes if you're actually Biden. Yeah, that kind of thing. A female, money, Scorpio, taxes, hiding money, and Uranus, a shocking surprise, revelation. Boom. So, so you get the theme now, right? Okay. So what else is going on? So the 22nd, that would be Friday. So Thursday is the winter solstice. What we also have, let me get back to the 22nd because that's an interesting day. The 22nd and into the 23rd, at some point we have Mercury retrograde conjunct the sun. This is always an important time in a retrograde of a planet when it makes its conjunction to the sun. I expect big news, big revelation about public figures, leaders, and this is also going to, so Mercury, as it was sextile to Saturn and began the week with a trine to Jupiter, the sun will also, when it moves into Capricorn and starting on that day, the 21st, lead into the day. So let's look at really the 22nd for that aspect starting to play out. Big day, the 22nd. I mean, that's a decision, an announcement, big news. And the sun will, after that, make a sextile to Saturn. So it is a decision, right? And sticking by your principles and repercussions. Saturn does bring repercussions, good or bad, right? The sun will sextile to Saturn and then it will trine to Jupiter, but it won't do that until the 27th. And that's a big day. The 27th is a big day. That's when Mercury will conjunct Mars, which is out of bounds. and square to Neptune. This is going to expose like a big deception or a lie, because that's Neptune. Neptune is hiding a lot of the, that's where like people's denial hangs out. And you know, we're probably going to see something that you didn't realize. A truth will be revealed or uncovered in a very big way. It will be quite shocking, I think. And it's going to expose big stuff. And it will have to do with leaders and men and money and females. I mean, I'm already thinking a specific situation so I can see where that is going. Because if you thought you heard the dirt, you ain't heard nothing yet. And with Mars out of bounds, it could be very aggressive, actions being taken, very assertive, bold, but it can be violent. So if there are situations and you've gotten a heads up, and you kind of have a sense of what's coming down the pike, get your ducks in a row so that you will be in a place where you will be out of the melee, so to speak, by the 27th. I also think there's going to be a big storm, because this looks like weather events, you know, one that would bring a lot of destruction involving possibly water, right? Because we've got Neptune in Pisces and Mercury, square Mercury, that's weather. The first pass around before Mercury went retrograde, the first time Mercury was in this place, it was at the end of November, and we had storms. Somebody had a lot of snow, I think, in upstate New York or somewhere. It's just going to be extreme all around. But Mercury is not just the weather, it's our minds. But so we're also talking about like the psychic weather, and a lot of things that I've been looking at for these degrees in Sagittarius are very difficult. And so I think there's something coming up at the end of the month that is a really big scandal involving leaders, possibly religious leaders, possibly some kind of like even assassinations, political stuff. But it really seems to me that there could be an issue with religion. So I was looking at this, and I think I said it in my last show, something about like religious fervor, you know, holy war. And then I saw somebody's video on YouTube with that very title, Our Holy War. Of course, it was Christian, and it's not, you know, actual violence, but more of a crusade for truth and justice, right? But this is happening on all different levels. So it could be personal, it could be political, it can be spiritual, definitely, absolutely, a spiritual war. And, you know, we suddenly become aware of what's been going on. Now, here's an interesting thing that I've been looking at. The sun is conjunct right about now, conjunct asteroid Psyche. So when we look at, mostly when Psyche is referred to in astrology as an asteroid, astrologers are looking at the mythology of Psyche and Eros. And there was a great book written on that. But I'm just looking at it and it's, taking it as at face value of the Psyche. We are dealing with the Psyche as the core root of all the difficulties. So I think that the sun transiting with Psyche, squaring to Neptune, is kind of bringing us out of our fog, our denial about something. And by the time Mercury and Mars hit that square to Neptune, Psyche, I believe, is still involved, because the sun right now is conjunct to Psyche. So we're talking about some kind of a revelation that we are getting on an ego level, even. And then Mercury will come in there too to help us to understand our mind, our thought patterns, our own psychological functionings and mental health, and to understand what's going on in society when it comes to this mental health crisis, really. And this is the breaking of the Psyche. Whatever it is that's going on, Mercury will be exact with Psyche on the 23rd at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. And when I'm looking at Venus in Scorpio, having gone through the scales of Libra, which are in the constellation of Libra is in the zodiac sign degrees of Scorpio. So Venus has been in the last couple of days at about 15 degrees of Scorpio. That's the south scale. That is what's called the insufficient price. So thinking about it like in ancient times, needing for the scales to match up, right? To balance the scales. And so if one side is lower than the other, you have an insufficient weight to balance the two. So the south scale of Libra at 15 degrees of Scorpio, where Venus was coming up lacking, let's say, or something that felt unfair, not balanced, where we realize that the situation is out of balance, perhaps, or there's an issue maybe financially, let's say. By the time Venus gets to 20 degrees of Scorpio, which will be, so she was at 15 on the 17th yesterday, and let's give it the 16th too, where things are not quite balanced. Once she gets to 20 degrees, and that's the 20th and the 21st, the north scale at 20 degrees of Scorpio is what is called the sufficient price, or the price that covers, like This is enough. This will cover it. So in terms of justice, the scales start to be balanced around the 20th and the 21st, going into the winter solstice. Now, this is also very important because when we're talking about this, the Libra and the scales of justice, that's associated with the goddess Astraea. And Astraea was the one who was responsible for weighing the deeds of men in the scales and presenting them to Jupiter. And Jupiter also represents justice. So Astraea is representing justice, as is Jupiter. And what are we seeing with Mercury trine Jupiter in retrograde? It's like a chance to go back and get justice, for the scales to be balanced karmically. So whether we are given an opportunity to correct something, perhaps that maybe we should have done differently in the past, or in terms of seeking justice where things were unfair and things were done in the past, maybe we weren't able to see the justice that we felt we deserved, but we can during this time. This is a time where justice can be had. And so you have to seek it. You have to know in your heart that, you know, whatever, it's yours. You claim it. You want it. You understand what justice looks like to you in your situation. Now, the other reason why Astraea is important is because the day that Mercury went retrograde on December 13th, Mercury in Capricorn was opposite the asteroid Astraea. So what am I talking about here? When I'm talking about Libra, I'm talking about the scales. The zodiac sign of Libra, that's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about the constellation of the scales of Libra, which are positioned over, connected to the degrees of the tropical sign of Scorpio. So when Venus is at 20 degrees of Scorpio, she is on the north scale. And that is the price that covers. That's justice. But in Greek mythology, Greek or Roman, in mythology, Astraea is the goddess representing justice and the scales. So the asteroid is something different, okay? The asteroids have names. This asteroid is named after Astraea. It's at 6 to 7 degrees of Cancer, which was opposed by Mercury when Mercury went retrograde. So Mercury, the mind, news, information, is thinking about justice. Let's go get us some. Hey, wait, here's an opportunity. I didn't think that I could get justice in this situation, or I didn't understand that it wasn't fair and I need to balance the scales, or I didn't think I could. I didn't think that I could. I did not believe that this situation could change. But now perspective has changed, and I'm looking at it not from a physical, external perspective, but I'm looking at it from the celestial mechanics and the divine justice, where I have to understand it, realize it, and understand that I have a certain spiritual authority to claim it, right? I don't know. It's just part of my belief structure. I have imagined myself going before some kind of divine council, if there is such a thing, probably, or my own guides, or whatever, some kind of judge or justice, God in whatever form, and say, this was not fair. I would like justice. Please help me to shift this situation and put things back in my favor. But it's not just because I think that I deserve it, or it's just what I want, my ego or whatever. It's come from an understanding of my own story, I guess, and realizing, things were done and they were not right and not fair, but I didn't realize them at the time. So anyway, just my 2 cents on the matter. But in terms of the things going on in like our society and government, this looks like a big change to me, because how can people stand up against criminality or tyranny in government if they don't know about it, right? So the more things are revealed and exposed, that's why I love Mercury retrograde times too, because Mercury is a trickster. Mercury is Hermes, and Mercury will bring messages through and give you information and insight on things that you would not otherwise know. So I always ask for clarity and guidance, and for the hidden things to be exposed. Always for your highest good, in alignment with your destiny or path, divine will, no harm to anyone, blah, 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 kind of thing. But there is a big push for justice right now. And this is the wind at your back if you're looking for things to shift around in your favor, or just in general. Yeah. So very important shift going on around the 23rd into the 24th. The Sun sextile Saturn looks very good, very positive, very supportive, very if there are difficulties, we get a handle on what it is, we get some insight on what we can do about it, we're supported, it feels really good, actually. Even though, because there's been a big realization of some things, and maybe that might have been uncomfortable, but I think that we'll be guided in the actions to take if we, if we're really seeking counsel on that, and just the information that we need. Saturn gets a bad rap, and Saturn and karma are kind of almost synonymous in some ways, but Saturn gives us the ability to plan and make responsible decisions, and Saturn rewards integrity. So not running from the difficulties and, the not expecting that everything is always going to run smooth, and just understanding that sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down, and it's not, God punishing you or anything like that. And just learning to kind of go with the flow of it, and making hay while the sun shines, taking advantage of the opportunities that we're given and the information that is coming in, to understand, who we are and what we're going through, and, what our struggles are, and maybe why, or what we're learning, why, in the sense of, what is the gold nugget I'm supposed to take from this? Or how can I, if I am contributing to a situation that is making my life difficult, how can I shift that situation by taking different action, perhaps? So, I mean, that's pretty much the ish from now to next Sunday, which is Christmas Eve. And I'm going to just skim through my notes because I noticed a lot of interesting asteroid action happening. I did mention asteroid Psyche. So it all comes down to the human psyche, the psyche of the collective, of society, based on, being gaslit and the lies and our own denial, maybe, or our religious beliefs. That does play into a lot. So looking at Neptune, which seems to be the culprit, and a kind of an overarching theme of what's been going on. Every time we've got a square to Neptune, it seems to dredge up more dirt. So in terms of asteroids, now I did mention this on Twitter the other day, that I think it's the 24th or the 25th, I think it's the 25th degree of Pisces, the Sabian symbols. If you're not familiar with those, there's a symbol for every degree of the zodiac, 360 degrees, and just look up mindfire.com or search Sabian symbols. And it gives you an interesting perspective and some insight on a planet at particular degrees of the zodiac. In this case, Pisces, 25 degrees of Pisces, where Neptune is right now, is the purging of the priesthood. Now, I have my Chiron on 25 degrees Pisces in my 12th house. So that's not karmic. And the 12th house has to do with past lives, hidden things, unconscious, and things very deep in the psyche, as well as our own self-sabotage and self-undoing, things we're not aware of. And as soon as I started learning astrology and I found my Chiron in the 12th and thought, my God, I need to excavate that, because like Chiron is kind of like everyone, has a particular wound that they're working through in this lifetime. And for Chiron to be in the 12th house, man, that is hard to get in touch with, because all I knew was that I was in a lot of pain and I didn't know why. And Chiron was the source and the, the root of it. So figuring out what that was, if I could just put a finger on it, would be a step in the right direction of healing. But having it in the 12th house, it's like it's always there at your back, behind you, and you don't really understand it. And it's Pisces. It's so undefinable, right? Oh my God. And it was deep, it was collective, and it was festering in the 12th house. But when I looked at this degree, when I discovered the Sabian symbols, and I thought about and I read about that degree symbol, the purging of the priesthood. And it made me realize that it had a lot to do with my religious upbringing and probably participation in things of a religious nature in past lives and being victim, because that's a lot with Pisces, Chiron Pisces, feeling like a victim, also feeling very like disconnected from source, even from the whole, or disconnected from whatever the wound was for me in the 12th house. But when I started working on that unraveled everything. So I really started looking at my religious beliefs growing up. And as that unraveled, it was replaced with an understanding that gave me a different perspective on the world and religion and belief systems and where that all comes from, and why I felt targeted, I guess, because I was here to unravel that. That's part of my karma. I unraveled it for myself and then started to understand, well, if what everything I thought was true, and that's not true, or it's not quite as I understood it to be, then what is the truth? And of course, in Pisces, the truth is infinite and undefinable and unreachable, but that's a lifetime of work. But the purging of the priesthood, and that's where I was looking at the corruption in church and trying to understand where that all came from. So that's why I think that there's something going on of a religious nature, a scandal. The stars that are at the end of Sagittarius have everything to do with, like, especially like 28, 29 degrees of Sagittarius have to do with disgrace, fall from grace, and the stars in mid to later on in Sagittarius, those are actually the stars in the tail of the scorpion, where the stinger is. So that's all of, like, they're associated with poison. And Venus, I will mention too. Venus, around the 23rd, will be at 23 degrees of Scorpio, which is contacting two stars. One is Unu Kalhai, which is in Serpens constellation, and Agena, which is in the constellation of Centaurus. And both of these stars are known for poison, also gossip and scandal. So it will be A very interesting Christmas season because the priesthood needs to be purged, because a lot of the people masquerading around, parading around as these very pious individuals. I'm thinking of every single one of the mega church pastors. They are not who you think them to be. Okay, let's just leave it at that. And if you go down the P. Diddy rabbit hole, there's a lot that was discussed this week in the back alleys, in the back streets. And I'll just leave it at that. But so there's a lot to do with also women, because it's Venus, right? Women, gossip, scandal, uncovering things, bringing justice. But because we also have transits through what is the stinger of the Scorpion, and those stars are associated with poisons. So we're talking about the poisoning of the mind in terms of mental health and sick and twisted individuals, but we're also talking about literal poisons here. So I want you to watch out for that too. And, it can be accidental poisoning, it could be food poisoning, it could be intentional poisoning. And it makes me think of the P. Diddy rabbit hole and how there were several people that allegedly could have been, most possibly been poisoned. So there's stuff coming up from the past about poisoning. There's the theme of poisoning is going on. And those things could be happening, but we don't know it right now. Maybe it doesn't get exposed until later, because there could be something happening at the end of the month. What I was talking about, that really intense aspects that are coming up around 26, 27, 28. Mars and Mercury square to Neptune. These aspects can expose, and they can also cover up. So there is, I think that it's possible there could be something that happens around this time, or that's talked about, and then we get more information and more is exposed. And going into January, when Venus starts to go through here, we're getting more information. And by the end of January, Venus will be in the same position, square to Neptune. And so again, things having to do with women, relationships, the arts. Let's not forget that Venus does rule fashion and the arts. And Venus will square to Neptune. Mercury is going to square to Neptune again when it goes direct, because it goes all the way back to 21 degrees of Sagittarius. And then as it goes forward again, it's going to square Neptune on January 9th. And at that time, the sun will square the nodes. So big doings. By that time, Jupiter will be direct. So it's almost like, we realize that we have an opportunity, a second chance at growth, expansion, justice, a higher perspective. We go for it, we dive into it. And then when we come out of the Mercury retrograde, we're like ready to go out of the gate. January 1st, Mercury goes direct. We have the information, we have the higher perspective, we have dealt with and transmuted our own mental poisoning and denial and acceptance of, or we have accepted what is really true. You know, maybe we were in denial and we didn't realize, we thought we were a victim, we thought there was no way to shift our situation, and then we realized, oh no, that is not the truth. We are powerful. We can change. We can have justice. So the other asteroids that I've been looking at around Neptune have been Borasisi, which is from a Kurt Vonnegut novel. It's the sun in a made-up religion. And the tenet of the religion is the lies that we tell ourselves so that we can be happy, or so that we don't have to look at the ugly stuff, right? Dionysus is also in Pisces around Neptune and has been. Dionysus associated with excess. You all know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, it's coming out in Hollywood, and it'll be coming out, you know, in the governmental sector also. But, you know, we could be realizing this is going on in our own life. But, you know, Dionysus is decadence and orgiastic parties and hedonism, excessive drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. So Dionysus, Clotho, which is one of the fates, weaving fate, and Heracles, which is just another name for Hercules, which I thought was interesting because we had, through the transits in Sagittarius, some of those stars are in the constellation of Hercules. Hercules is Engranasen, the kneeling man. And if you remember from other shows, I've associated Engranasen and Angon, Judge Angon. So Hercules is shown as, in the constellation depiction, is the tightrope walking man. Funambulism, it's called. Walking the tightrope. And so he keeps the crowd in suspense as he's walking across the tightrope. And so a lot of suspense going on. But I also was reading a little bit on Hercules, and Hercules is the child of Hera, out of wedlock. Hera was Zeus's wife, and Zeus is Jupiter, right? And Hera and Juno are the Roman and Greek equivalents of Jupiter, Zeus's wife, Jupiter / Zeus. So if I get them mixed up, just go with it. And so the etymology was kind of interesting because Hera and Hercules is the glory of Hera, and something about the root of the word of Hera and Heracles that had to do with wind and atmosphere, and thinking how we have a shift in the winds, a change in the weather, and we can all kind of sense it coming around. And then I did see that the asteroids Juno and Hera were being aspected this week, and they're making a funky aspect to one another because Juno Is Juno. Juno is in Virgo, and Hera is in Aquarius, and that's a funky aspect. So looking at the two sort of faces of the goddess representing, wife and marriage, we have Juno in Virgo, which Virgo, the stars in Virgo are located in the constellation of Ursa Major, and a lot of them have sort of this scorned woman vibe to it. And then we've got Hera in Aquarius. Seems to me she's a little bit more concerned with group associations and networking, perhaps, and freedom and independence, maybe. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. I didn't really look too deeply into it. But the Hercules connection with the asteroid Hercules being at 29, almost 30 degrees of Pisces. So everything that hits 29 degrees of Sag is going to square Hercules. And Sagittarius, the zodiac sign, we have the stars that are located in the constellation of Hercules. And in later degrees, we're getting into the actual stars in the bow of the archer, which is Sagittarius. So, it sounds confusing, but definitely having to do with the bow and the arrow of the archer, actually the pointy tip of the arrow. And that would definitely relate to pointy things that one might stick in your skin, and that it could contain poison on the tip, right? The tip of the spear, the arrow, and actually on the 22nd, where the sun meets retrograde Mercury at 0 to 1 degrees of Capricorn, that will be on the stars Spiculum and Al-Nasl, which are in Sagittarius, and they are the tip of the spear or the arrow. And that would be in the bow of Sagittarius, the archer. Kind of made me think of the pen is mightier than the sword. So whatever will be said around this time, them will be fighting words. Get ready to have your head blown. The other thing I wanted to mention, one more thing. When Mercury and the sun conjunct on the 22nd, they are going to oppose a few asteroids that I've been looking very closely at. Now, I did mention that Mercury, when it made its station, it opposed Astraea in Cancer. And that was signaling a time of justice, or to go back and get justice. And it's interesting because as we see Mars going out of bounds, making a trine to Chiron, there are men coming out now who were allegedly abused by Diddy. So there is a healing of men's issues, but men coming out and speaking out boldly about abuse. I also was looking at the the stinger of the scorpion in the constellation of Scorpio is located in the last 5 or so degrees, roughly, maybe a little bit before that. I think there's a few stars before that, but there are stars in Sagittarius that are in the stinger of the scorpion. And what does that have to do with? Think about where that's located in the body. Think about where all the poisons pass out after you digest. They pass through and pass out of the body through the bottom, right? The nether regions. And Scorpio, the sign itself, rules the organs of elimination and the sexual organs. And I would look at the what do you call it, the stars in the stinger as being like the anal region. And what did we just see on Twitter in the Senate, whatever, the Senate meeting room, where the dude was getting like boinked, right, in the anal region. While we have, the sun going through that part with the sky and Mars. So crazy. So then you have guys coming out talking about being abused by other men. So it all fits. Okay, no, I'm rabbit trailing. This 22nd, the sun and Mercury, give or take a day or so on this, is going to oppose asteroids in Cancer. Asbolus, which is the seer in terms of oracles and seeing the future. Asteroid Chaos, pretty self-explanatory. And asteroid Ascalaphus. Ascalaphus is a snitch. I think it was a raven who kind of tattletaled, right? I think it was the raven that snitched on Persephone, telling Hades that she ate pomegranates from the underworld, which she wasn't supposed to do. So Ascalaphus represents whistleblowers, snitches, people who come out with information that others would prefer not be discussed. And this is very, very interesting, because I've been watching these asteroids here in Cancer for probably the whole year, and they are retrograde right now, but they've been kind of hanging out in that spot. And every time we've had aspects to these asteroids, it's been pretty interesting about people coming out and blowing the whistle about things, shady dealings. So this will be very interesting. So Chaos and Ascalaphus is obviously some kind of chaos that this whistleblower is bringing forward. Whatever information they're bringing forward causes chaos, right? And somebody's been trying to avoid that chaos. But Mercury, when it went retrograde, opposed Estrella, we're going back, we're going to get justice. So there's more whistleblowers coming out. And then when we get into January, so around January 2nd, happy birthday to me. And the 3rd, we've got the sun opposing asteroid Photographica around 13 degrees of Cancer, and asteroid Hades, god of the underworld, Hades, hell, right? Oh my God. Someone is going to be in hell over photographs that have yet to be released. Crazy. I'm just wondering what the transits were now that I'm thinking about it. When that video of the dude like getting the backdoor treatment on Twitter in the Senate room, talking about pressing charges for defamation or whatever. Are you kidding me? He says he never did anything to, disrespect his job and work environment. Shut the fuck up. Go away. This is an idiot who's never had any consequences in his life. And you can tell. These sort of narcissistic people who will just say, whatever, and say whatever. And we all know the truth. We're not falling for that shit anymore. Okay. I think that's now about it. I'm going to try to pop in later on this week to talk about some stuff. If I can, but if not, I'll see you guys next Sunday. I'm going to try to get back to getting it on Sunday. I'll try to do it on Saturday, pre-record, and get it up on Sunday. But if it's not, well, Monday's Christmas. We'll see. Anyway, thank you all for staying till the end. For those of you who have the patience for my blabber. And again, please like, share, and subscribe. And hit the bell for notifications on YouTube so you'll know when my new videos come out. And again, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, the Gilded channel. I will give a link in the description. My Substack, astrolunachick.substack.com for readings, astrolunachick@gmail.com, or you can call or text the hotline 914-222-1231. 1231. That's New Year's Eve, guys. So I think it's a pretty interesting number, and I've been looking at that date and thinking, well, why did that show up in my phone number? It's gotta be something, right? Yeah, and then I look at the astrology and I'm like, oh man, it's totally the end and the beginning, same time. It's big. It's cool. I can't wait. All right. Thank you again for being here. And until next time, ciao for now.